This is Hiring on All Cylinders, live from HR Tech.
Hi everyone, Britt Ryan here, head of recruiting from Intello, and I am joined by my colleague Sean Simmerly.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm good, Sean. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Pretty stoked to be here at HR Tech.
I am super excited to be here at HR Tech, and I'm even more excited to be here with you.
Yeah.
I know. So you and I are going to be hanging out a little bit, aren't we?
Just a little bit, and we're lucky enough to have a phenomenal first guest to kick things off.
I couldn't agree more. We are joined for our first podcast by Tara Sinclair, who is a senior fellow at Indeed. Hi, Tara.
Hi, Britt. It's great to be here.
Thanks so much. We're thrilled to have you. And I have to tell you, I am so excited you're the first person I get to because, I think what you do is so cool. And I always love talking to people whose brains work in a totally different way than mine do. So I'm really looking forward to also getting a bit of education today along with the rest of our listeners. So tell us, Tara, can you, at least as part of the intro, tell us a little bit about what it means to be a senior fellow at Indeed? And you work within a particular unit called the Hiring Lab?
Yes.
What's that all about?
Oh, it's such an exciting place to work. So the Indeed Hiring Lab is really a group of researchers, primarily economists, who are looking at Indeed data and also the exchanges that we have with employers throughout the world to learn more about the modern labor market than what we've ever been able to know before.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. And how did you fall into a job like that? I'm so curious.
My mom found my job for me on Indeed.
No way.
Yes.
Oh, okay, wait, that's amazing.
That is amazing.
Yes. So 4 years ago, Indeed posted a job on their website looking for an economist to start out the Indeed Hiring Lab. And the position was posted in Austin, Texas, which is where my parents are located. My mom saw the job ad and thought this might be a great way to bring her daughter home.
That's unbelievable. I love my mom to pieces, but there's no way that she would ever even be able, she can't even buy anything on Amazon. So I'm so proud of your mom. Well, so talk to me about, I'm curious for you. So you actually came in and you started this hiring lab. You were the first hire. Yes. So what does that look like for a company like Indeed that we have seen grow so explosively to get to a place where they say, we need a chief economist here to run a hiring lab? What does that mean? What did that look like for them? And, what did you take on when you went there and what have you built?
Well, so Paul Darcy, who is our head of marketing at Indeed, he really had this vision very early on where he said, Indeed is a labor market company. And so economists study the labor market and we have all this amazing data. We should have economists who are looking at this data and can provide insights to our clients, to job seekers, and really to help the whole world potentially with insights from this information. And so it was a really early move on the part of Indeed. It was back before we had 1,000 employees, and we're now over 5,000 employees. Wow. And so it was a very early move. Came in, started working with the data, and my first project, I came in, I'm an academic economist, I'm also a professor at George Washington University, and so I wrote something that looked very much like a white paper, deep research, diving in, looking at how job seekers are looking for a variety of different types of jobs that match their skills. They're not necessarily limited to the same sorts of industries or narrow job titles that employers are often thinking are the vectors that job seekers travel. And so I write this white paper and I'm like, here's my first research. And they take a look at that and they're like, okay, now let's translate it into English.
For me, for Britt, right? Okay.
Right, no, and it was such an amazing process and so inspiring for me to learn and to talk with employers because sometimes economists, we can hide in the ivory tower and we can look at data and we can tell stories to ourselves about what the data are saying. But without the additional insights of people who are actually in the labor market, taking actions day to day, we can sometimes be detached from those stories. That's why coming to conferences like HR Tech is so important because I can test out these stories and say, this is what I'm seeing in the data. What does that mean to you? And that can help me refine my understanding of what's happening in the labor market.
Right. I think that's so interesting because what my love for data is that it gives me the ability to tell a story. And so while I may not be the person who's running all of the numbers are what helps me, let's say, to justify adding a recruiter to my team. Mm-hmm. And what I think is so interesting is that, Entello's located in San Francisco. We're in the Bay Area. What we talk about with so many like companies in the Bay Area is how hard it is to hire, how hard it is to find people who have the right technological skills. Is that something that's real? Or like, talk to us about, how real is the pain? Are we just whining? Or
there really is evidence on both sides of this. The traditional economic story is that when a recruiter says they're having a hard time filling a role, the typical question is, well, how much are you paying? But, obviously when a hiring manager comes and says, this is the band we're willing to pay, recruiters can't necessarily deviate too much from that. And so the pain for the recruiter is very real. But it's also true that we do see these various kinds of skills mismatches that we're challenged by. The labor market is constantly evolving, and the roles that we need to fill today in certain locations, that's not necessarily where the potential workforce is. And so trying to improve those matches, that's really where the research is trying to go, and how to share information about where opportunities are on finding the talent pool. That information needs to be conveyed to employers, but then also job seekers need to know who's looking for them and what sorts of skills they should be developing in order to improve our talent flow going forward.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's very interesting, because I feel like now more than ever, being able to go to a new city and discover a new opportunity completely, that you would have been unaware of previously is even more common than it ever has been. So where do you see this going to increase those connections? Like, where can the recruiting function really go to help connect these people? Like, where do you see that going?
Well, just as we were talking earlier about being able to translate the language from economists to HR professionals, the same kinds of translations need to happen between employers and job seekers, because honestly, what job seekers are saying they're looking for and how they look at jobs versus how employers look for job seekers, they're on very different planes. And I think that's one of the key pieces of information is how can we help each group talk more efficiently with each other?
Are there any insights that you've gained, or any things that you can share where you're like, and as a matter of fact, here are the top things I'd recommend?
Yes. So I would start by really thinking about how much job seekers really think of themselves not as a predefined job title. And in particular, they definitely don't think of themselves as a marketing level 3 person. They think of themselves as their package of skills and interests and experience and background. And they see that as being potentially transferable to across a range of employers. And so one of the things that we try to help job seekers do is translate those skills back into different job titles that employers are using, but also help employers to see that maybe we want to be looking for this broader set of skills, particularly as the labor market is tightening. And then another thing that I think is really important to keep in mind is that with this tighter labor market that we're all facing, job seekers, obviously salary and particular location of the job, those remain incredibly important. But there are other features that job seekers really care about that we might have more flexibility around. And in fact, one of the key ones is flexibility itself, and finding ways to make the job experience, the day-to-day experience, more enjoyable for the job seeker, more family-friendly. That sort of feature is really valuable to job seekers today. And we've seen that increase in terms of searches on Indeed for terms related to flexibility have been growing really strongly on a really regular basis over the last several years.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, so do you think maybe that is fueling partially perhaps the gig economy, this idea of flexibility and wanting to be in control of your own destiny in some regards?
Absolutely, and that's where we do see kind of two different types of gig worker. I myself am actually a gig worker in the sense that I have a full-time role, my professor job, and then Indeed is my side gig. And that's something that's very, very fulfilling to me because it allows me to bring together two very different things that I think my talents can serve both. And there's lots of high-skilled people that have that sort of interest. And there's also a lot of people who want to pursue a passion project, but they might also know they need to earn enough money to make a living, and they might want to balance that in some way, but that's only possible if there's flexibility around that. But it is true that we also see people on the lower end of the income spectrum who are still bringing together multiple jobs just to make ends meet. And again, the more flexible those multiple jobs are, the more they're going to be able to manage their family lives and be productive, good quality workers for the long term for an employer.
I think you bring up a great point around flexibility, and there are certain roles, certainly for those of us who work in technology, where, whether it's the idea of I can take my laptop anywhere and do my job, versus somebody perhaps who works in the service industry or has multiple jobs in order to make ends meet. And so I'm curious, what are some of the trends that you're seeing around those types of things in terms of what does it really mean for somebody to have flexibility, and what does that look like? What is the bigger picture there?
Right. Well, I think this is one thing where the employer definition of flexibility is very different from the job seeker definition, because oftentimes the employer definition is having job seekers on call, right? A part-time job with flexible hours might mean hours that are flexible at the needs of the business from the employer perspective. And obviously, for lots of businesses, that's really important to have that flexibility from their workers. But there's the possibility that technology could make it that those jobs are also much more appealing to job seekers than they've been before, if we can use that technology to match the job seekers who want to work certain hours with when those hours are available. And that's, I think, a potential huge area of growth.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so talking about technology, what are some of the other things that you're seeing? What are the things right now where you're saying, wow, that's really something interesting? Is it, AI? What's happening there in the HR tech space in particular? And, what are your feelings about it? Is it buyer beware, or is it wow, this is amazing? Hop in the next Uber that you see with a big funky thing on top.
I am bullish on technology in general, but I am aware of the potential costs, particularly for the transition. People have very long careers, longer than ever before, as we see that lifespans are expanding and people want to continue to work. They feel healthy, they want to work, and people now, young people today, are planning careers for 40, 50 more years. And so what we're seeing is that makes it hard for both job seekers today who might be worried that their current skill set might be replaced by some sort of automation in the future, but also for employers who are trying to fill roles that have been claimed to be under threat from automation, but they're still looking at a need for employees today. I mean, one classic example, I think, is the trucking industry, where lots of young people don't necessarily want to go get those skills. It's expensive to get a CDL, et cetera, but then they might be replaced before the end of their career, so they don't want to get into it. But older truck drivers are retiring, and so we're seeing challenges in filling roles there.
That's so interesting too. And I was stalking you on Twitter before, we started talking here on the podcast, and I saw something that you had posted around the labor market and around polarization. And I think that's also a really interesting thing when you think about the choices that some people are making. And what are some of the things that, whether it's we as people or we as a society can be doing to help raise awareness around that and to help, continue to look at opportunities to fill in the middle?
Yeah, I am very much concerned about this polarization where we're seeing that high-skilled people are seeing lots of job opportunities, and recruiters continue to fall over themselves for various specific skills of talent, particularly the college-educated. The unemployment rate is incredibly low for that group and looks to be just not ending anywhere near in sight that they're going to continue to have a strong labor market. And at the very low end, we hear of job shortages in low-wage jobs, worker shortages in low-wage jobs. But it's really that middle income where people had thought they could have a house, support a family, and now those jobs are disappearing. And for those people, if they can't jump into the skilled category, they get pushed down into the low category. And my particular passion in this space is to find ways to bring people from the middle and low end up into that high end to build the talent pool and also to grow our economy.
Yeah. So what is one of the tactics that you might seek to do that? Is it vocational schools? Like, what exactly are you trying to accomplish, or how are you going to get about that?
Well, I was actually really excited to talk with an employer this morning here at one of the pre-events, and she was talking about how in the healthcare space, they're going to high school counselors and talking to high school counselors about some of the more skilled but not yet college degree requiring healthcare jobs. Those jobs are growing like wildfire. Employers are having a hard time filling those roles. Let's tell young people early about these opportunities because they don't know about that information. And so telling that information to counselors who actually apparently didn't necessarily know either because that wasn't what they experienced. They were telling everybody you got to go to college.
Yep.
But not everybody is going to go to college. So giving them information about where the high growth opportunities are without a college degree is really important as well.
Is that, you bring up a great point, and I think it's so interesting because the work that you do is global in nature and that you're looking at many different economies. I mean, Indeed, I think, is in 60 countries. Mm-hmm. So with that and with looking at polarization, there are other countries that encourage people to find an apprenticeship or find a vocation. Is that, are there other places where it's not so polarized where you think they're doing a really good job?
You know, this is something where we are, particularly in Germany, we do see some improvements on the apprenticeship front. But what's interesting is that the study I was tweeting about actually was looking at a commonality of polarization across all of the developed countries. And so it doesn't seem like anybody's got this completely figured out. In fact, it does really seem like it's a pretty global phenomenon that we're losing these middle skill jobs. And that's okay as long as we are creating a high skilled workforce. So we're moving people into those higher skilled, higher paying roles. That's going to grow our economy and it's going to be good for everybody.
Right.
Fascinating. So obviously we're here at HR Tech. I know that one of the things you are excited about is talking to people, hearing stories, kind of creating that layman's term interaction. What are some of the other things you're excited about? Any specific presentations, any specific technologies?
Well, honestly, what I am looking forward to most is one-on-one conversations with employers where we are talking around the skills gap issue to find out what sorts of directions they can move in order to create a larger talent pool. You know, the classic economist question is, why can't you raise wages more? What's holding that back? Can you move to other locations where the pool might be greater? Can you create more pipelines by training workers in-house, maybe taking somebody who's done well in a different position in a different department and training them in order to move them up in your organization? Those sorts of one-on-one conversations is really what I'm most excited about at these sorts of events.
Fascinating.
That's fantastic. Well, Tara, I know we could certainly talk to you for the duration of HR Tech, but also recognize that you probably have other people to go off and see and talk to. Would you mind sharing your Twitter handle with us so that people know how to find you?
Oh, absolutely. I'm on Twitter at Tara Sinc, TARASINC.
Great. Well, I'm already following you. And thanks again for your time.
Great. Thank you, guys. It was great talking with you.